he was suddenly trapped inside the game world. A white-haired woman cries out a warning to someone named Lord Kadam, but Kadam, brimming with power, vows to end the coming fight quickly. He launches himself off the cliff, a meteor of pure destructive force, crashing into the first demon with a massive, bone-crushing impact. And he's immediately swarmed by more red-eyed, snarling beasts, but his weapon cleaves through them with a single devastating slash, a whirlwind of steel and fury that tears through the demonic horde. This remains of the demons rain down upon the cracked earth, leaving a field of absolute carnage in his destructive wake. And in the center of it all, our boy Kadam stands alone. He takes a moment, surveying the destruction he has just caused, knowing this is just the beginning in the brutal demon realm. This path to the archdemon will be far harder than he imagined, but another, more immediate problem is now on his mind, because he knows he's about to get an earful from someone named Melissa. As if on cue, a new wave of demons surges forward, and a furious voice screams his name from the clifftop. It's Mage Melissa, furious that he charged in all by himself. Kadam acknowledges her as his allies finally join the fray, a blonde swordsman leaping into combat against hulking stone creatures. This is Hero Gale, his blade already flashing through the enemy ranks. He tells Melissa to save the lecture for later. The fight comes first. This red-haired mage complains that the hero, Gale, is frustratingly righteous, while a silver-haired priestess prays for the fighting spirit of their god, worrying that their vanguard, Lord Kadam, is pushing himself too hard for them, just as a hulking monster's head is crushed in the background. A priest named Gordon stands over the defeated beast, telling her not to worry, and he reassures Priestess Cyril that Kadam must have his own reasons. They agree to focus on the monsters first and speak with Kadam later. On a high cliff, a powerful warrior gazes down at the raging battle, introducing himself as Kadam alongside the rest of his party, this vanguard of the team assembled to defeat the great archdemon. He is a warrior of Atala, the god of struggle and the wilderness. But a reflection in his eye reveals a modern man in a mask, someone from our world who is suddenly possessed into this game. This game's objective is to gather companions and defeat the archdemon. But for a modern person, this brutal fantasy world is a living nightmare. To survive the endless slaughter, Kadam drinks from a flask, facing down yet another wave of grotesque monsters in this cruel world. A system window reveals his unique trait. Blood Berserker, which grants buffs from demon blood. He plunges into a crimson rage, desperate to end the fight, his arm transforming into a monstrous claw as he rips through his enemies. Believing that if he kills them all, he can finally escape this hell. Lost in the frenzy, he's covered in the blood of his foes. His only thought is to get out of this world faster and faster until he stands victorious atop a mountain of monster corpses. His face is twisted into a demonic form. His humanity almost gone, a red-furred demoness lunges forward with a vicious snarl, but Kadam, drenched in gore, curses the demonic horde. He grabs her mid-strike, promising to devour them all, his face contorted by pure unadulterated rage. He declares his intent to drink every last drop of her blood. When a sudden light pierces the darkness, a voice calling his name, and he sees Melissa desperately trying to reach him through the haze. Her magic weaves golden restraints around his berserk form, and through the monstrous features, he finally recognizes her face. Seeing his own transformed hand with a jolt of horror, his blood berserker trait is taking over, sacrificing his sanity for power, and what was once just simple game text is now a terrifying reality. It's a madness that burrows deep into his mind, devouring him from within, making the demon blood taste sweet as the thirst becomes impossible to suppress. He questions if he can hold on long enough to face the archdemon, while a dark beast inside him screams for nothing but destruction. But Melissa holds on to him from behind, pulling him back from the brink. She tells him not to blame himself for the bloody rampage, and he realizes that now his friends must protect him from himself. Carrying her, he turns to face his other companions, who vow to help him fight against the encroaching insanity, with Gordon even promising to knock some sense into him if needed. Just as a new voice cuts through the tense moment, a blonde knight in shining armor asking if their rest is over. Extending a hand and reminding them of their shared mission, Kadam, weakened and bloodied, is held by his red-haired comrade, their hands locking in a pact of survival through the harsh journey, and the blonde warrior finally screams Kadam's name in a desperate roar, revealing a flashback of Kadam in a monstrous form ready to strike as the demonic beast below him snarls in defiance, while another warrior unleashes a swirling vortex of fire, and the blonde warrior looks on, believing the fight is finally over, as the massive creature's body is struck down decisively, its form dissolving into nothing but dust and shadow. This red-haired woman stands alone in the desolate aftermath, clutching her book and wondering if the nightmare has truly ended, when a comforting hand rests upon her shoulder, and the priest assures her that by their god's grace, it is done. She lets out a breath, finally believing it's really over, but her relief instantly shatters into pure shock. As a strange light descends upon the barren landscape, and a voice cries out in confusion asking what is happening, while the blindfolded woman desperately calls out for Lord Kadam, seeing his silhouette running away from the battlefield. This blonde warrior screams for Kadam to stop, warning him of the unknown danger, but Kadam stands unmoving against a stark white background, his expression turning calm and strangely resolute, telling his comrades it was an honor to be with them in person. And as he begins to fade, a gauntleted hand reaches out in vain, only to be engulfed by a blinding flash of golden light. This defeated creature tumbles down the jagged cliff face. As the blindfolded woman lands softly on the broken ground, she sits alone under beams of light piercing the dark clouds, whispering the name of the warrior who has just vanished. Kadam elsewhere in a pitch-black void, a pair of worn boots walks forward, following a faint trail of glowing lights through the endless dark, revealing Kadam himself scarred and weary but moving with purpose. He recognizes this place, thinking about what he'll do when he gets back home, dreaming of simple comforts like a cold beer and a good night's sleep. He feels a pang of regret for leaving his companions without a word, but accepts that his life as Kadam the Great Warrior is now over forever. Ahead he sees a glowing threshold, the exit back to his reality, but as he gets closer his eyes widen in sudden dawning horror, a sweat-soaked face contorts in disbelief, certain this must be a dream because a glowing cross materializes in the darkness before him, and his shock gives way to a slow, unsettling laugh, which erupts into a full-blown, desperate roar of madness as a blinding white light completely engulfs his vision. He stands alone in the light, his shadow monstrous. Laughter echoing endlessly, this system announces the cruel truth. New Game Plus restarting the game. This scene changes to a bright, sunny day with a column of soldiers marching. A close-up reveals a prisoner's hands bound in heavy iron shackles. And there he is, Kadam, walking among other prisoners in the procession. This other captives loudly plead their innocence for petty crimes, until an annoyed guard turns and shouts for them all to be quiet. A soldier glares back at the line of prisoners with clear annoyance, muttering about the trash making all that noise. But the accused merchant desperately tries to plead his case. This guard turns to him, demanding to know what he wants now. This merchant swears he was framed and begs to meet his accuser. For a moment, the soldier just stares back in silence. This merchant realizes some people frame the innocent to inflate their own achievements, while the guard internally curses the young paladin for starting this mess, knowing that one wrong move against a paladin means his head will fly. He furiously asks if the merchant dares to doubt one of Elga's paladins, then dismisses him with a false promise of release if he's innocent. This defeated merchant shuffles back into the line of prisoners. This guard knows the man's fate is sealed by the paladin's accusation, but his thoughts move on from the doomed merchant, his attention drawn to the massive chained barbarian behind him. He can't even fathom how they managed to capture such a man, and inside that barbarian's body. Our boy's being led along, completely lost, his mind racing to figure out what the hell is going on. This body feels familiar, but all his previously built-up power is gone. This madness and guilt that consumed his mind have also vanished. He realizes the New Game Plus message meant he started over from the beginning, but he still can't understand the strange circumstances of this new life. When an old man beside him suddenly gets his attention, this old prisoner holds out a strange, gnarled root. Offering it as something to chew on to make the journey less boring, Kadam stares back at the old man in silence, who explains he was once helped by barbarians and this is his repayment. So Kadam accepts the strange, gnarled root in his shackled hands. But when asked how he was caught, our boy can only say he doesn't know. This old man seems to accept the strange answer without question, and Kadam notes the Empire's hostility towards those with different beliefs, which surprises the old man, who asks if he's never heard of the Lucania Empire. Kadam only remembers it as a kingdom, learning that was a long time ago. He wonders if this is a parallel world as they're led to the capital. Lucian there, the old man warns they'll face a brutal inquisition by Elga's judges, but Kadam is strangely calm, thinking at least he's not being killed yet, a sentiment that horrifies his elderly companion, who warns him that inquisitors will treat a pagan like a toy for torture. Describing the gruesome fate that awaits him in vivid detail, just then a paladin on horseback strikes the old man down, slamming him into the dirt with a brutal, punishing blow, and declaring that insulting Elga's agents is a sin punishable by death. This paladin turns with a cruel, smug look on his face, his horse stepping forward with purpose, and he confronts Kadam, asking if he's the source of the trouble, demanding he bow his head and beg for forgiveness to avoid the same fate, promising to spare his life if he shows proper submission. But Kadam just responds with a wide, terrifying grin which sends the paladin into a furious rage at being mocked, and screaming blasphemy, he raises his glowing spear to strike. Kadam's eyes narrow as a spear tip comes into view, and a confident, almost mocking smirk crosses his face. This young paladin looks on in absolute disbelief as Kadam catches the spear between his shackled hands. He struggles to pull his weapon back, but it won't budge. Screaming for the barbarian to let go of his sacred lance, Kadam simply obliges the paladin's request by yanking him clean off his horse with immense strength. This furious paladin vows to deliver divine judgment upon him, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and righteous anger, but Kadam is already airborne, leaping towards his foe and slams him into the ground with a thunderous crash. He stands over the fallen knight, a silent, imposing victor, while the paladin's horse lies defeated nearby. This young warrior is left stunned and broken in the dirt. Kadam simply watches, his expression unreadable, but the paladin struggles to his feet, seething with rage, furious that a pagan would dare harm an agent of God. Kadam knows this rookie won't die from such a light blow. Just as the spear tip begins to glow with holy power, this paladin raises his weapon to the heavens, preparing a skill. Our boy watches, recognizing the attack he's about to face, as the knight calls upon his god, Lord Elga. Master of Light, he asks for the power to strike down this servant of demons, his face contorted with fury as he channels divine judgment. A young paladin roars, swinging his massive blade with holy light, charging directly at Kadam and the broken prisoner cart, and Kadam can only watch the attack come, knowing his weakened body has no hope of dodging it. This paladin leaps into the air for a devastating final blow, smashing the ground and shattering Kadam's chains with the impact, carving a massive trench into the earth with his strike. But Kadam sits up, a strange blue light glowing on his chest, this paladin staring in disbelief that he's still alive. He remarks that the barbarian's durability is as ridiculous as his size, while Kadam curses his reset stats with only blood berserker left, frustrated that even a weak demon would be an easier fight now, and he desperately searches for a way out of this situation. When he suddenly catches a familiar metallic scent from the cart, this paladin takes a confident step forward, declaring that the barbarian's journey ends right here, telling him to accept death. Before his face twists in shock as a foul stench suddenly fills the air around them, Kadam lets out a low, unsettling chuckle which erupts into full-blown laughter, confusing the paladin. He taunts the rookie, saying his god has chosen a new champion, then smashes his fist into the floor of the broken cart. Pulling out the severed, bloody head of a goblin and holding it up as the paladin recoils in disgust, while the glowing blue mark on Kadam's chest shines brighter, a dark, knowing smile spreads across Kadam's face as he holds up the severed head of a goblin-like creature. His hands gripping the gore-soaked hair tightly, its dark blood dripping down his muscular chest, and he tilts his head back, drinking deep from the wound. This surrounding soldiers and the paladin can only stare in stunned silence. While the knight recoils in disgust at the barbarian's filthy display, he orders a nearby soldier to finish off the blood-crazed man, and the terrified guard cautiously approaches the glowing barbarian, his hands trembling as he struggles to follow the command. With a desperate cry, the soldier lunges forward with his spear, but Kadam moves in a blur of impossible speed, catching the spearhead directly in his teeth. He then grabs the soldier's face with one powerful hand. As the man begs and pleads for him to spare his life, his words muffled by Kadam's crushing grip, and the blonde knight can only watch in utter disbelief. Just before Kadam's fist smashes into the soldier's head, he notes the demon was low-level, offering only a basic power boost, but realizes this newfound strength is enough to escape the procession. In fact, it's more than enough to secure his freedom, his eyes glowing with crimson light as he unleashes a roar. A primal scream echoing as his power surges through him. This remaining soldiers are frozen in absolute terror, one of them stammering, unable to even say the word monster. A guard screams in terror, calling the escaped prisoner a monster, but the paladin's spear strikes miss their mark, hitting only dirt, and the terrified guards break rank and begin to flee for their lives. This blonde paladin furiously orders them to hold their ground, threatening severe punishment for any soldier who dares to retreat. He believes a few more stabs will be enough to finish the job. When a massive severed head is hurled through the air, crashing into him with enough force to send him flying back, he lands hard, his armor scraping against the rough terrain, and looks up to see the grotesque demon head lying before him. His confusion quickly turns to absolute shock and disbelief as he sees Kadam charging towards him with glowing red eyes. This paladin quickly scrambles into a defensive stance, spear ready, calling upon the power of his god, Lord Elga, for strength. He begs for the power to strike down this servant of demons, his face twisting with righteous fury as holy light engulfs him. He lunges forward in a brilliant flash of golden energy, screaming a battle cry in the name of his deity, and his holy spear plunges directly into the barbarian's chest. He declares victory, telling Kadam to beg for forgiveness in the afterlife. But Kadam just looks down at him, asking if that's all he's got. This paladin's triumphant grin instantly vanishes into pure horror, as Kadam simply grabs the spear embedded in his own flesh and begins to pull the holy weapon out with raw strength, before delivering a devastating punch that sends the paladin flying. A brutal impact echoes across the quiet plains, as Kadam relentlessly pummels the young paladin into the dirt. His fist drips with blood as the paladin weakly begs him to stop, pleading for forgiveness and admitting that he was wrong. Kadam stands over the broken man, his red aura simmering down, and as he turns to leave, the paladin whispers a word of thanks, but the moment his back is turned, the paladin's face twists with hate, vowing revenge. He lies on the ground, catching his breath, completely unaware of his mistake. He swears to make Kadam pay in Elga's name, but then he notices something. A spear tip slams into the ground just inches from his head. Kadam's boots step back into view, his patience clearly at an end. And the paladin's eyes widen as a dark shadow falls over him. His face contorts in pure, unadulterated terror. Kadam notes that even now the paladin is still praying to his god, pulling the spear from the earth with a quiet hum of power. He looms over the terrified knight, ready to deliver the final judgment. Kadam hopes he'll get to meet that god of his in the afterlife, but the paladin can only stammer out a desperate plea to wait with a final insult. Kadam calls him Elga's puppy and strikes. He pins the paladin to the ground with his own spear, ending it. Kadam stares down at his work, his expression cold and unfeeling, then turns his attention to the distant guards watching in horror. They immediately break rank, screaming for everyone to run as Kadam reflects on a hard-learned lesson from his first life, and the remaining soldiers scatter in a full-blown panic, fleeing for their lives. A fleeing guard gasps for air. Glancing back in absolute terror, he believes he's finally safe. Just before something smashes into his face, this other escaping soldiers are systematically struck down by flying spears, as Kadam's cold philosophy echoes in his mind. Never leave loose ends. Yet one soldier has found cover, trembling as he watches from the bushes. He desperately covers his mouth, trying to stifle his panicked breaths, but a cruel smirk spreads across Kadam's face as he turns his head. With a flick of his wrist, he hurls the paladin's spear with deadly accuracy, this weapon whistling through the air directly toward the soldier's hiding spot. finding its mark and ending the last guard's life in an instant just as he turns. A voice calls out to him from behind. An old prisoner praises him for taking down the paladin. He asks for help with his cuffs, and is met with Kadam's fist instead. A lesson from his first playthrough flashes through his mind, causing the other prisoners to stumble back in sudden, dawning fear. He won't make the same mistake twice. Vowing to leave no loose ends, one of the prisoners begs for his life, asking what they did wrong, but Kadam grabs him by the throat, raising a weapon to strike. His expression is cold and resolute as he ignores the desperate pleas. He stands silently for a moment, his crimson aura burning bright. This field is now littered with the bodies of the prisoners he executed. He knew that letting them live meant they would surely talk, a risk that could bring a high-ranking paladin unit after him. But it seems he missed one. A Chained man sobs, cursing him as a pagan. This lone survivor trembles in the bushes, utterly broken by the massacre. A lone survivor screams in terror as Kadam approaches him, and Kadam looms over the last remaining man from the procession. His expression is cold and resolute, the bloody spear held ready while the man desperately proclaims his innocence, his voice cracking, but Kadam remains unmoved. A towering shadow of judgment, he begs for mercy, pleading that he's been wrongly accused, but Kadam simply asks why he should be spared. This man explains he has a family waiting for him back home. And while Kadam believes he's innocent, that's not enough to save him. Just as Kadam raises his weapon, the man screams out a desperate offer. He asks if the powerful barbarian needs a guide to these lands, and the word makes Kadam pause, considering the proposition. This man introduces himself as a merchant who knows the land better than anyone. So Kadam begins his interrogation, asking when the Luciania kingdom became an empire. This merchant is completely baffled by such a strange question, realizing this barbarian might be from a land isolated for hundreds of years. Kadam's expression darkens as he demands an answer, and the merchant quickly explains it's been 248 years since the empire was founded. Kadam then asks for the date in the lunar calendar, a familiar system to him. But the merchant says that ancient system is over 1,130 years old. This revelation hits Kadam hard. The world he knew is long gone. He urgently asks about the Elga Church in the Demon Realm, and the merchant explains the continent is now divided into 3 territories. This Elga Church has grown immensely powerful, while the Demon Realm is a place of no return. Kadam is shocked to learn that no one has ever come back alive from the Demon Realm. Kadam interrogates a merchant, listing the names of his former comrades, but the terrified man insists he's never heard of any of them, until a flicker of recognition crosses his face at the name Melissa. Kadam himself feels a strange sense of familiarity with the name. This merchant stammers, trying to recall where he's heard it before, as Kadam wonders how the heroes who saved the world could be forgotten, questioning if this is even the same timeline he once knew. He demands to know why demons now swarm the continent, and the man explains the various theories people believe: divine punishment, a mad archmage, or the return of a great evil. He claims only the king above the clouds knows the real truth, leaving Kadam to silently process the strange information. This merchant's spear suddenly drops from his hand, and Kadam turns to see what startled the man. He looks out over the vast, empty plains. Concluding that he must be 300 years in the future, he reflects on being driven from his original world, and now he's been cast out of the one he fought to protect. All his knowledge of this world is now centuries outdated, and the comrades he fought alongside are long gone. He clenches his jaw, the grim reality setting in, knowing his friends have all turned to dust in this new era. He remembers their final bloody moments, this brutal end they all met in his first life, a past filled with nothing but slaughter and pain. He questions if he can ever return to reality, or if he's doomed to an endless new game plus loop. Kadam's eyes are shut tight, his face a mask of grim determination. With a surge of strength, he snaps the broken spear shaft over his chest, and the terrified cart driver can only stare in utter confusion. He then raises the sharpened point of the spear to his own throat. Standing tall and resolute, he prepares to take his own life. This horrified driver begs his lord to stop, asking what he's doing, but Kadam believes starting the journey again would be full of regrets, his hands tightening on the makeshift weapon. Ready to plunge it in, he just hopes that whatever awaits him isn't a game over screen. But just as he's about to act, a memory flashes through his mind, the sharp point pressing against his throat. Just moments from the end, remembering a question about his plans after defeating the archdemon, he recalls a red-haired woman's dream of building a tower for mages. And with that memory, his eyes snap wide open with sudden purpose. He grabs the driver, demanding to know if he heard the name Melissa. And the man confirms it might be the name of the first tower master. Kadam demands to know its location, learning it's in a city called Vestana, a place that will take at least 2 months to reach from here. Kadam processes this new information, a plan forming in his mind, and a small, determined smile begins to form on his face. He thinks of her again, realizing she's made it impossible for him to die. He orders the driver to guide him there by the fastest route possible. But the man protests, saying he can't waste time on a long journey, so Kadam offers him the most precious payment he can possibly give. Kadam offers the terrified cart driver a chance to keep his life, while the bloody spear remains planted in the ground as a grim monument. He orders the man to find the key and gather supplies for their escape. Amidst the wreckage, the driver finds a simple, sturdy longsword, which Kadam claims, knowing he can forge it into a much better weapon. He considers the paladin's spear, but a blessed weapon rejects all others, and he briefly wishes he had the powerful axe from his past life. This driver packs a bag, relieved to be alive but worried about his master. Kadam then offers him a canteen filled with the demon's dark blood. a grim provision for the journey ahead as he secures his new sword with his new reluctant companion in tow. Kadam declares it's time to leave. This two of them walk away from the carnage, disappearing into the plains. Days later, crows circle over the silent, blood-soaked battlefield, gathering to feast on the remains of the fallen soldiers and paladin. A new group of knights finally arrives at the gruesome scene. Finding the body of the paladin Linton among the massacred, their leader, a blonde woman named Lady Helia, assesses the situation, ordering her subordinate to search for any clues about the attacker. She dismisses the fallen paladin as foolish for getting himself killed. Wondering who would be bold enough to murder one of the archbishop's men, her expression hardens with cold fury as she contemplates the culprit, vowing that whoever is responsible will pay a heavy price for their actions. This scene shifts to a dark night under a cloudy, ominous moon, where Kadam now rests alone by a campfire deep within a forest. His embers glow brightly, a small point of light in the vast darkness. Kadam rests by a dying campfire, a strange mark healing on his chest. His belongings packed and ready to move at a moment's notice, while somewhere in the woods a man pants heavily, running for his life. This tree's blurring past him in a desperate, frantic dash. He gasps for air, believing he has finally managed to escape. His only thought is to put as much distance as possible between them. He recalls needing a companion for the dangerous journey ahead, but his companion is a monstrous barbarian who devours demons, and in the past few days, his attempts at conversation were met with silence. Even his offers of comfort were completely ignored by the stoic man. His questions about Kadam's past were quickly shut down. He realized the barbarian was unreadable, a man of few words and no patience, concluding that he wasn't traveling with a person but a wild beast. But that terrifying silence wasn't even the worst part of his ordeal, because as he tried to keep pace, Kadam would just watch him struggle. His expression clearly showing his impatience with the guide's slow speed. This man's biggest problem was the barbarian's inhuman marching pace. Even as a merchant known for his stamina, he couldn't keep up. Kadam would sprint ahead and then coldly wait for him to catch up, staring him down from a distance with an unnerving intensity, his eyes silently threatening to crush the man if he fell too far behind. This guide wonders what kind of man has legs made of steel. Pushed to the absolute brink of a nervous breakdown, he knew his only chance at survival was to escape. And so he runs, a tiny figure fleeing through the vast, moonlit forest. This driver believes his opportunity has come sooner than expected. He gasps for air, completely exhausted from his frantic escape, but he remembers his bag, his entire fortune left behind at the camp, knowing that going back for it would risk waking the sleeping beast. He decides his own life is far more precious than any possession. After running for what feels like an eternity, he stops to catch his breath, convinced he's finally free. A voice suddenly asks where he's going. This man's eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror. He stammers in disbelief, unable to comprehend how this is possible. Kadam stands before him, calmly asking why he was running away. He coldly reminds the guide about the payment he was promised. This driver trembles uncontrollably, unable to form a coherent response. He immediately drops to his knees, begging for forgiveness for his mortal sin, pleading for his life. He bows his head to the ground in total submission, but Kadam doesn't want an apology. He wants a reason for the escape. He demands to know exactly why the guide tried to flee. This terrified man struggles to find the right words, admitting that Kadam's inhuman pace was simply too fast to keep up with. He was certain he would collapse and die if he continued at that speed. And now he's sure his death is inevitable for trying to run away. Kadam listens silently, his expression as unreadable as ever. He simply tells the man it's time to go back, promising that he will walk a bit slower from now on. Kadam turns and walks away under the bright full moon, leaving the guide utterly confused by this unexpected mercy. Back at the campfire, Kadam sits stoically while the merchant sleeps fitfully nearby. This terrified guide is trapped in a nightmare, begging his lord to spare him. But Kadam simply stares into the flames, completely unfazed by the man's cries. He reflects on his brutal pace, a habit from his first life where he was always being hunted, recalling the hostile demon realm where his comrades watched over him even as he slept. He lets out a slow, steadying breath in the quiet of the night, realizing this new world is far less dangerous, and his madness is not an immediate threat. Besides, he now has a reason to slow down. The merchant is a useful guide, who suggests they take a detour to avoid a heavily guarded border crossing. This man looks back nervously, awaiting Kadam's approval for the new route, and Kadam simply tells him to do it. Much to the guide's relief, Kadam knows his own mental map is 3 centuries out of date, making a guide essential. This merchant explains that a barbarian like him will only be safe in the Free City Alliance territory, which makes Kadam wonder if the zealous paladins are why demons are so scarce. He checks his canteen of demon blood, knowing it will soon spoil and need replacing. Their journey continues deep into a forest under the light of a crescent moon, until the merchant stops abruptly, having spotted something in the trees ahead. Through the foliage, they can see the wooden walls of a small village. This guide suggests they stop there for the night to get food and rest, but Kadam's eyes narrow, sensing that something is terribly wrong here. This merchant points out the obvious. The entire village is shrouded in darkness, and even more unsettling, the main gate is wide open with no guards in sight. He wonders if the village is abandoned, but Kadam is determined to investigate. This guide panics, warning that a monster could have attacked and driven everyone away. An eerie silence hangs over the desolate, empty-looking settlement. This merchant gasps in shock as Kadam appears right behind him, and Kadam grips his sword, sensing a monster or demon nearby. He draws his longsword. Standing tall against the starry night sky, a confident smirk spreading across his face as he welcomes the news. Two of them walk into a desolate, eerily silent village. This guide nervously questions where everyone is, noting it seems recently inhabited, but Kadam simply walks forward, his senses on high alert, his gaze fixed on something just out of sight. This terrified merchant asks why he suddenly stopped moving, realizing they're standing before the only open door in the entire village. A monstrous foot suddenly slams down from the darkness within, and a grotesque creature with a blade lunges out with a furious roar. Its red eye widens in pure shock for a split second. Because Kadam has already sliced its head clean off its shoulders, this monster's severed head flies through the air in a spray of dark blood, and the merchant screams as the headless corpse collapses at his feet. From the shadows, another monstrous foot steps into the light, revealing a horde of menacing green goblins emerging from the building. This merchant panics, saying goblins are normally timid, but Kadam knows something made them aggressive, and he smiles, realizing they've come to exactly the right place. A large goblin charges forward, swinging a massive club with a battle cry, but Kadam meets the attack with a swift, glowing arc of his sword. This other goblins can only stare in disbelief at the sudden counter, as Kadam prepares to unleash a devastating follow-up strike. While another goblin rushes in from the side with a crude cleaver, Kadam unleashes a brutal, sweeping strike against a goblin, his blade connecting with a spray of dark blood, and he effortlessly parries another monster's attack. As a hulking goblin with an axe charges forward with a roar, Kadam's expression remains cold and utterly focused, and he lunges forward, plunging his sword deep into its chest. This creature looks down in shock at the blade, just before its entire head erupts in a violent burst, leaving Kadam standing over the twitching corpse. This terrified guide peeks out from behind a crate, asking if they're all dead, wondering if the fight is finally over now, but Kadam suddenly turns, his sword raised for another threat. A large green hand grips the edge of a doorway nearby, revealing a massive goblin holding a muffled captive. This guide realizes with horror that it's a little girl, and the monster lets out a furious, threatening roar, but Kadam's blood-soaked sword is already in motion. As he throws it with incredible speed and precision, lodging the blade directly between the goblin's eyes, this beast stumbles back, dropping the child as it collapses, and the guide worries if the girl was harmed in the chaos. Kadam insists that won't happen, ripping off the captive's blonde braids. He looks down at the survivor, calling out to the kid, revealing a terrified young boy with tears streaming down his face. While Kadam prepares to interrogate him, the guide tries to soothe the boy with a toy. This merchant offers the little girl some dried licorice to calm her down, telling her the monsters are gone as Kadam quietly observes the interaction. And the man explains he has a son about the same age back home, but Kadam remains silent, his expression unreadable as always. This little girl holds the treat and softly whispers for her mom. This merchant quickly promises that he and Kadam will find her, but the child begins to cry, saying her parents abandoned her here. Kadam's eyes widen slightly at this sudden dark revelation. This horrified merchant asks if her own parents tied her up, and Kadam finally understands the grim truth of the situation. Suddenly, a woman's voice calls out for someone named Lenny. As a group of villagers with torches cautiously approaches the scene, this woman rushes past them, scooping the little girl into her arms, crying with overwhelming relief that her daughter is safe. This other villagers can only stare in disbelief at the pile of goblin bodies, and one of them turns to Kadam, asking if he was responsible for this. Kadam crushes a goblin's skull under his hand and simply says no, pulling his sword free from the corpse and adding, "My sword did." He turns his cold, intense gaze upon the village elder, demanding to know why they offered their children as a sacrifice to a demon. This elder explains their village was built in a forest crawling with goblins, but recently the remaining creatures began attacking them relentlessly, their assaults growing so vicious that many villagers were wounded. Desperate, the men of the village set out to exterminate the goblin threat, only to find a terrifying, powerful demon leading the horde. This village elder explains they were too weak to fight the demon and its goblins. Instead of killing them, the demon lord gave them a terrifying ultimatum, demanding each household offer its most useless child as a sacrifice. This horrified cart driver realizes they've already sacrificed their children, but the desperate villagers argue they had no other choice to survive. Kadam's fist clenches with silent, simmering rage, and he slams his fist into the man's face, silencing him instantly. He then asks a very specific question about the demon's horns. This confused man stammers that the creature didn't have any horns. A moment of silent calculation passes over Kadam's face. He grabs his sword, his decision made, and orders the man to lead. This terrified villager has no idea what he's talking about. Kadam stands ready, his intent now perfectly clear. He's going straight to the demon's den. Kadam recalls the man's confusion about the demon's horns, concluding that no horns means it's a low-rank, base-type demon. He grabs his sword, ready to move out immediately, but the villager is still confused about their destination, until Kadam makes his chilling objective perfectly clear. They're going straight into the heart of the beast's lair, and so under the cover of darkness, a single torch is lit, leading a small party of villagers through the treacherous woods. This elder apologizes, explaining the village is poor and has no reward, but Kadam isn't interested in payment. He's doing this for his own reasons. This relieved man thanks the mysterious mercenary for his help. Kadam offers the man an axe, saying it's the only weapon they have to spare. This guide stops, announcing they've arrived at the demon's cave. A small army of villagers stands before the gaping dark maw of the beast's lair, and Kadam looks on with a grim, unreadable expression. This elder nervously announces they'll be heading back to protect the village, and the merchant realizes with horror they only came to guide them here, but Kadam dismisses them as cowards and orders the merchant to come with him. This was not at all what the terrified merchant had in mind. He reluctantly follows Kadam into the suffocating darkness of the cave. This merchant asks why he didn't scold the villagers for their cowardice, and Kadam simply asks if he's ever faced a living demon before. This man stammers, admitting he's only seen demon corpses on the black market, so Kadam explains that a direct confrontation changes a person forever. It crushes all noble will, leaving only the raw instinct to survive. This merchant still can't accept it, questioning how parents could sacrifice their children, but Kadam says sometimes survival means making unthinkable choices. This merchant argues that to the children it's like the whole world abandoned them, questioning the value of a life that throws away basic human decency. He turns to Kadam, who has fallen completely silent as Kadam's inner thoughts question if he can ever live a normal life again. This merchant, sensing the tension, asks if the kidnapped children are still alive. And Kadam pauses for a moment, considering the demon's nature. He explains that a less evil demon would have already killed them, but a truly cunning one would keep them alive for leverage. This merchant looks up in terror as Kadam suddenly raises the axe above his head. A goblin screams out a warning for its lord, and the terrified villager can only shriek in fear as a crude axe comes flying through the darkness, embedding itself deep into an unseen target. Kadam looks on, confused by the sudden attack. Just as a hulking green form stumbles into the light, it's a goblin with the villager's axe lodged in its skull. This creature collapses, revealing a horde of others behind it, and the entire swarm lets out a furious battle cry. This guide panics, but Kadam simply tells him to keep the light steady. He takes a single determined step forward into the fray as a goblin lunges, its eyes wide with shock because Kadam has already plunged his sword through its jaw. He effortlessly catches the monster's wrist, stopping its attack, while another goblin swings a club from behind him. Kadam's gaze remains cold and focused on the fight, but he realizes the cave's stalactites will limit his swings. This other goblins hesitate, sensing their chance to attack, so Kadam tightens the strap on his sword for a better grip and turns to face the roaring horde head-on. He unleashes a vicious, sweeping arc with his blade, which slices clean through a goblin's skull, carving a path of destruction through their ranks. His face is splattered with blood, but his eyes are clear, and he spots a fallen axe, realizing he'll need another weapon. Kadam grips his axe, ready to carve a path through the horde. He brings the blade down hard, splitting a goblin's skull, then wades into the fray, a whirlwind of brutal strikes, leaving a trail of shattered bodies and red-eyed shock, his axe cleaving through another monster with pure force, until a severed head rolls to a stop on the cavern floor. This guide stares in disbelief, realizing Kadam did this all alone, standing atop a mountain of goblin corpses he just created. He shouts that the remaining goblins are finally retreating in terror, but Kadam knows they're just running back to their master. They press forward, with the guide noting the strange path ahead, following the fleeing monsters deeper into the darkness. This passage suddenly opens into a massive, wide-open chamber, and the guide realizes the walls look deliberately carved out. Kadam stops, sniffing the air for a familiar demonic scent. He warns the man that the demon is close, ordering him not to run, explaining that the goblins will hunt him down if he flees. His eyes narrow, his focus sharpening on the threat ahead, and in a flash he unleashes a powerful sweeping attack, planting his feet firmly to meet the unseen enemy. He swings both his axe and his sword with blinding speed, taking a brutal hit but landing a devastating blow of his own. This red demon lord stares down, realizing Kadam isn't a villager, a wicked, knowing grin spreading across its monstrous face. But Kadam's expression is one of pure, cold interest. Kadam's internal thoughts contradict the villager's words. This demon has horns. He observes that while the horns are small, they are clearly still growing, and he stands ready to face the menacing red demon in its dark, cavernous lair. He curses, realizing growing horns means a low-rank demon is evolving into a mid-rank threat. This demon smirks, clearly enjoying the look of dawning horror on Kadam's face. This creature lunges forward in a sudden, terrifying blur of red motion. Kadam's eyes barely track the impossibly fast movement. Preparing to counter, he brings his sword up just in time, blocking the demon's strike with a flash of steel. This demon taunts him, sneering that it likes humans because they are weak and obedient. Kadam admits to himself he lost track of its speed, blocking that last attack on pure instinct. He confirms this is far beyond the speed and power of any low-ranked demon. This demon snarls that Kadam killed too many of its goblins and must now beg for his life. He knows a low-ranked demon is easy, but even elite soldiers struggle against a mid-rank one. This creature offers him a single, twisted chance to survive its wrath. It points to his arm. Beginning to lay out its cruel and unusual terms, this demon orders him to cut off his own arm and eat it completely if he wants to live. Kadam knows he's not ready for a full mid-rank demon, but this one's horns aren't fully grown. This demon grows impatient, demanding to know why he isn't obeying its command. Kadam plants his sword firmly in the ground, telling the creature it's been far too noisy. He pulls out a pouch, declaring he doesn't take orders from a mere blood bag. With a quick slice of his knife, he cuts the pouch open, spilling its dark contents. This demon's eye widens in shock as it recognizes the powerful scent of the blood. This demon watches in disbelief as Kadam pours the strange blood all over himself. This now empty pouch falls to the cavern floor with a wet thud, its purpose served, drenched in the mysterious liquid. A dark and powerful aura begins to radiate from Kadam. A berserker roars, unleashing a torrent of crimson energy. Facing down a red demon with long, menacing claws, this warrior's eyes glow with a blood-red intensity. Realizing his power-up is temporary and he must end this quickly, this demon is stunned, feeling fear from a human despite its new power, and it snarls, promising to kill its opponent, lunging forward with a furious, bloodthirsty roar. But the warrior notes its new horns are making it reckless, as the demon unleashes a vicious swipe with its claws. But its movements are now perfectly clear to the warrior. He meets the attack with a powerful swing of his axe, forcing the creature to cry out in pain and shock. This warrior glances down at his weapon, noticing the damage, knowing the axe will shatter but ready to fight with his bare hands. This demon lets out a low, guttural growl, screaming that this human is unforgivable for his defiance. This warrior calmly watches his opponent's every move, and raises his axe for a final, decisive blow. He brings the weapon down in a devastating, glowing arc, smashing it directly into the demon's skull with blinding force. This monster is driven to its knees by the incredible impact. Staring up in disbelief at the warrior's overwhelming strength, this warrior stands over the beast, his axe still lodged in its head just as the blade finally shatters from the strain, but he remains ready, surrounded by fragments as he faces the demon. This demon lord is stunned by Kadam's overwhelming destructive power. It lets out a furious shriek as it lunges forward in a blur, its razor-sharp claws swiping directly at Kadam's face, but he takes the brutal hit directly to his chest, leaving deep gashes as the beast lands a few feet away. Kadam, however, remains unfazed, his sword glowing with power, and the demon can only stare as the blade begins to shine as he unleashes a devastating, sweeping counterattack with a guttural roar. He puts all his strength into the blow, forcing the demon to sense the danger and leap backward. His blade shatters the ground where the creature just stood, leaving the monster whimpering on the floor before him. This terrified beast looks up, asking what kind of being he is. Convinced that Kadam cannot possibly be a mere human, Kadam's cold, red eyes simply stare back in silence. This demon tries to rationalize, believing he's a monster in disguise. It lunges forward again with a shriek, but Kadam is faster, leaping through the air to crush the warrior beneath it. It realizes it's outmatched and that its attacks are being read. Suddenly, it peeks from behind a rock, shouting for someone to stay back, revealing the merchant fending off two goblins with a torch. He desperately threatens the creatures with the fire, warning them away, and the bright flame of the torch flickers in the dark cave, giving the demon lord a sudden, sinister idea. A monstrous foot suddenly stomps down, extinguishing the only light. Kadam realizes the demon is targeting the helpless merchant. He drops his sword, instantly reaching for a different weapon, gripping a small hand axe from his belt with deadly intent. He smirks, telling the beast he knows exactly what it's planning, and vowing that its little scheme is about to fail miserably. This demon keeps its distance, perched high on a cavern spire, but Kadam knows it's too fast to hit with a simple throw. His eyes narrow as he formulates a new, devastating plan. He grips the axe, channeling his crimson power into it, declaring he'll destroy the ground beneath its feet. Instead, with a powerful grunt, he hurls the axe not at the demon, but at the stalagmite it's standing on, catching it by surprise. This weapon spins through the air with incredible speed and force, smashing directly into the rock formation with a huge impact. This merchant and his goblin captors look up in total shock as the demon is thrown off balance by the shattering rock. This entire spire explodes, sending a cloud of debris flying, and Kadam's abandoned sword lands perfectly in the ground. This demon cries out, temporarily blinded by the dust and grit, giving Kadam the perfect opening to press his attack. He rushes forward, grabbing his sword from the ground in one fluid motion, and plunges the blade deep into the demon's unprotected eye. This monster shrieks in agony, clutching its ruined face, while Kadam coldly compliments the new look he's given it. It screams that it will kill him, but the blow is clearly fatal. Kadam is stunned. The demon is still alive after a direct headshot. He grips his sword tightly, calling the creature a persistent nuisance. This demon shrieks in agony, the blade still embedded in its skull. With a furious roar, Kadam rips the sword free in a spray of black blood, standing over the beast as it finally begins to collapse. Its head splits open as it lets out a final gurgling cry, and the massive body crashes lifelessly to the cavern floor. Kadam feels the crimson aura around him begin to fade. The buff is wearing off. He breathes a sigh of relief, glad he didn't face it without the power-up. But a sudden, strange sound makes his eyes snap open in alarm. This remaining goblins are chattering nervously. Their master now gone, he knows their demonic ferocity is gone now that the demon is dead. But he grips his sword, preparing to finish the job. In a flash of steel, he cuts down the nearest goblin without hesitation, vowing to wipe out every last one of these demi-beasts. Another goblin freezes in shock as its companion falls, but Kadam is already moving in for the next kill, his blade slicing through its head before it can even scream. He spots one trying to flee, its back turned to him, and then his eyes lock onto the last one in the darkness. This goblin still holding the flickering torch. As he prepares to strike the final monster, it cries out for its lord, but the desperate scream actually comes from the human merchant. Kadam's eyes widen in pure shock at the sudden betrayal, and he presses his blade against the trembling merchant's throat. This merchant stares, sweat dripping down his face in the eerie silence, as Kadam offers him his sword, pulling the terrified man to his feet. But Kadam's eyes still glow with the fading embers of his berserker rage. This merchant asks if he's alright, worried by his pale complexion, but Kadam simply says they need to find the children and leave. This man can only nod, still in shock from the battle he just witnessed. They press forward, dragging the demon's corpse out of the darkness, back in the village. Cries of disbelief and joy erupt from the crowd. Families are reunited in a wave of tears, thanking the mercenary profusely, and the merchant offers Kadam a meal, but our boy just needs to rest. An elderly woman clutches his arm, weeping with gratitude for her returned children. She notices the demon on his shoulder and invites him to her home for food. Kadam tells the merchant to give the meal to the children who need it more. He then turns and walks away, leaving the man staring in awe. But a closer look at one of the rescued boys reveals not relief, but vacant terror. This merchant's expression shifts from joy to utter confusion, which quickly turns to dawning horror as he understands the truth. He flashes back to the cave, seeing the children chanting in a terrified trance, and Kadam explains that they have been relentlessly brainwashed by the demons. One boy mutters about the ruin of humanity, calling himself a useless child. His face twists into a silent scream. His mind clearly shattered, a psychological torment so powerful that even a righteous priest couldn't endure it. Kadam clarifies it's not just brainwashing. It's a cruel truth engraved in their minds, this fact that their parents abandoned them, a wound that will never heal because a demon's nature is to feed on human suffering and endless despair. This guide is left completely speechless by the grim turn of events, finally understanding the demon's cruel logic for keeping the children alive. He desperately asks if the parents' repentance could somehow save them. And Kadam admits that it's not entirely impossible. However, he questions if people who abandon their children once can truly change. This guide is silenced by the harsh, undeniable truth in his words. Later, having left the cave, the guide looks back toward the village, watching as Kadam walks away carrying the demon's corpse on his back. He calls out in a panic, asking why Kadam is leaving so suddenly, urging him to rest. But Kadam says witnesses will soon come forward. He explains that while killing soldiers is one thing, killing a paladin is a major crime. This guide's face pales. Remembering the paladin Kadam defeated earlier, Kadam's eyes narrow with urgency. Knowing they might already be hunted elsewhere, a blonde knight in shining armor stands over a fallen comrade, her expression cold and determined as she surveys the scene. Back in the village, Kadam grips the demon's severed head tightly. Squeezing out every last drop of its dark, powerful blood, he holds the drained head as the shocked villagers look on. Noting his pouch is half full, enough for another emergency, with his task complete, he tosses the demon's corpse to the ground, and a villager nervously asks what he plans to do with the body. Kadam simply tells them to burn it, as he has no further use for it. This villager is stunned, wondering why he'd destroy a valuable prize. Already scheming about the profit they could make from selling the corpse, but Kadam warns that its scent will attract monsters, creating new threats. Kadam glares down at the villagers, asking if they want more goblin attacks, and the terrified men quickly stammer that of course they don't. They insist they were just about to burn the demon's corpse when an older woman approaches, calling him mercenary, sir. She offers him a collection of gear as thanks for saving the children, and Kadam accepts, noting the items will be quite useful. He wastes no time, immediately equipping the new boots and belt, then tells the guide it's time for them to head out, but a sudden sharp pain flashes across his chest, causing him to stumble as he clutches an old wound from a paladin. He notes that while his body heals from demon attacks in a day, this wound from that blessed spear still hasn't closed after 10 elsewhere. The body lies impaled by a spear as crows circle a grim scene. A female knight in shining armor, Lady Helia, arrives to investigate, scolding her subordinate Ethan for failing to find any clues. They stand over a massacre where prisoners and soldiers were slain, and the flustered Ethan asks if she has any suspects in mind. She snaps at him, telling him to find actual evidence instead of just guessing, reminding him this is why he's still stuck at the rank of paladin. Ethan thinks she's just as clueless, but knows he can't argue with her, not with Helia Munnell, the arch-paladin who slew 20 demons alone. She is, after all, the Empire's youngest and most celebrated arch-paladin. He admits to himself that while her personality is terrible, her skills are the real deal. Resigned, he watches her turn to leave the gruesome sight, but she stops, ordering him to take out the holy relic they were entrusted with. An armored knight protests, using the sacred Damien's twin mirrors, a holy relic where one mirror showed the future and the other the past. But a female knight insists they must use it to solve the archbishop's nephew's death. She dismisses his fears, claiming it will only break for a great demon. He reluctantly hands over the star-shaped artifact, and the female knight kneels, preparing to activate its power. A brilliant light suddenly erupts from the mirror's surface, projecting a violent, purple-hued vision of the past. They see a barbarian drinking demon blood, a horrifying sight, then watch him threaten a man with a blessed weapon. An act of pure sacrilege, this vision shows the warrior holding a massive, glowing sword, and the two knights can only stare in shock at the raw power on display. This vision focuses on the man's face, his eyes burning with red-hot fury, and in that instant the holy mirror shatters into 1,000 pieces. Both knights stare in absolute disbelief at the broken relic. This mirror that only breaks for a great demon has been destroyed, leading the armored knight to suggest an immediate retreat to the holy city. But the female knight Helia has a different idea, a smirk on her face. She declares they will continue their search for the culprit. Her hand tightens around the hilt of her sword, and she draws her blade with a flash of holy energy. She vows to personally cut down this fiend in human skin. Meanwhile, the merchant sits alone by river in the dead of night, fearing he'll never trust again but unable to stop thinking of the children. He shakes his head, trying to push away the traumatic memories. This merchant resolves to stay on the barbarians' good side to get home alive, and returns to their camp to find Kadam already resting by the fire. He offers to make dinner, surprised to see the warrior is already down, but his confusion quickly turns to alarm as he sees Kadam trembling and sweating in a pain sleep. This guide panics, wondering how a demon slayer could be so vulnerable, and then he spots it. The deep, angry wound on Kadam's chest has reopened. Kadam grits his teeth, realizing the blessed spear is the cause, explaining its holy power was designed to be fatal to demons. But since he drinks demon blood, the blessing is now poisoning him. This guide says he should have rested, but Kadam insists that won't help, instead asking about the moon phase from the night before. He seems relieved by the answer, muttering that they haven't missed the timing, when a sudden howling from the woods cuts through the night, a sound the guide recognizes with a growing sense of dread. This darkness between the trees fills with dozens of glowing yellow eyes, and a massive clawed paw steps into the firelight, revealing a vicious blade wolf, a terrifyingly powerful beast. Kadam can only sigh, his exhaustion clear on his face as he grabs his axe and sword for yet another battle. He pushes the terrified guide behind him, telling him to stay back, cursing this world for never giving him a single moment of peace. He stares down the entire pack of snarling monsters, and despite his wound, he raises his weapons, ready to fight, facing the hungry jaws of the approaching wolf pack. Kadam gasps for air, his body screaming in protest from the strain as he stands guard over the merchant. A pack of wolves emerges from the woods, and one of the beasts lunges forward with a ferocious snarl, but Kadam meets its charge with a powerful swing of his axe, connecting with brutal force and shattering the wolf's skull instantly. He sends its lifeless body tumbling back into the dirt as the others watch, but his vision is shaking, making it impossible to line up a proper shot. Undeterred, the rest of the pack surges forward in a furious wave, so Kadam drops the axe and draws his massive sword, bracing for the onslaught. This beast swarm him, one sinking its teeth into his arm as he cuts another down, but he's quickly being overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. Another wolf latches onto his forearm, its jaws clamping down hard, and he grunts, grabbing the beast by its snout to hold it back. With his other hand, he smashes another wolf away with a powerful backhand, his eyes burning with grim determination as he fights through the pain. This relentless assault continues, the pack tearing at him from all sides, its teeth sinking deep into his shoulder as he struggles to stay standing. He glares back at the beast, his patience clearly wearing thin, and with a roar he smashes it against a nearby tree. Silencing it for good, he stands panting over a pile of corpses, but the pack is far from finished. This remaining wolves circle him, their initial aggression turning to caution. He sees the pack tightening its formation, realizing he can't hold out much longer. Suddenly, he hears a panicked shout from behind him. It's the merchant, desperately trying to ward off the wolves with burning branches. He knows it's like drinking poison in his condition, but it's his only choice. Suddenly, a pair of monstrous wolves appear, their eyes glowing with malice, and Kadam quickly drinks the demon blood from his pouch to prepare for a fight. He drains the last drop, tossing the empty pouch aside, and a dark red aura explodes from him as he stands over the fallen beasts. This remaining wolves snarl, but they seem hesitant to attack him now, as his eyes burn with a familiar berserker rage fueled by the demon's power, and he lunges forward, his blade cleaving through the first wolf's skull. Meanwhile, the guide is cornered by two more wolves near the campfire, their fangs bared as they leap forward to attack him, leaving the poor man screaming in absolute terror. But before they can reach him, a blade flashes through the darkness. As Kadam tears through the pack with inhuman speed and ferocity, he realizes the blood berserker buff changes with each demon's blood he drinks. And as two more beasts charge him, he braces for the new effect, his body surging with a strange, new energy. He feels a sudden burst of speed, an agility boost from the demon's essence. It makes sense, considering how impossibly fast that last demon was in the cave. His newfound speed is too much for the wolves, who begin to back away, and the guide shouts in disbelief that the monsters are actually retreating. But Kadam knows they aren't just running away from him. Something much larger has just arrived on the scene. He stands his ground, a grim expression on his face, the guide cowering behind him, a massive, scarred wolf with glowing eyes emerges from the shadows, and the guide points out this new beast is twice the size of the others. Kadam clenches his jaw, realizing he's now face to face with the pack leader. He realizes with a jolt that his berserker buff is about to fade, just as a monstrous white wolf lunges to meet his blade. He struggles against its overwhelming strength and crushing weight, his face twisting in a desperate grimace as the red aura flickers. This force is too much, and he grits his teeth in pain, stumbling backward as he clutches the wound on his chest. This guide cries out in a panic, asking if he's alright, begging him to snap out of it as the wolf looms over them. Kadim can only gasp for air, the last of his power gone. This beast growls, ready to finish him off as the guide watches in terror. But Kadam looks to the sky, wondering if the conditions are finally met, and his expression suddenly shifts with dawning realization. His eyes snap wide open as he whispers that it's finally here. It's midnight on a night when the moon is completely gone. He plunges his sword deep into the earth with a resounding thud, calling upon a legendary warrior to place a blade in his hand. He begins a chant for the great warrior who thirsts for struggle, vowing to forge a blood-soaked name into the blade on this moonless night. A brilliant golden energy erupts from him, engulfing the area, and the massive wolf can only stare in utter confusion. This guide watches, completely stunned by the sudden turn of events. Kadam kneels within a pillar of sacred fiery light. As a voice asks what name he will give this sword, he recalls this resonance of will from his first playthrough, and with a glint in his eye, he names the sword Mosquito. Kadam stares down, gripping a plain sword as a fiery aura erupts around him, and a strange red symbol begins to glow brightly on the blade's guard, manifesting as a sharp, angular rune etched directly into the steel. A system message reveals his unique trait. The one who forges names. He kneels before a pillar of light, ready to perform the ritual, and a prompt asks him what name he will give this sword. With glowing eyes, he declares its new name will be Mosquito. This fiery energy surges once more as the naming is complete, confirming the activation of his unique world-altering trait, but the ritual is interrupted by the roar of a monstrous wolf, causing the guide to cry out in absolute terror for his lord. Kadam plants his newly named sword into the ground, bracing for impact, then swings his blade in a vicious arc at the lunging beast. This wolf snaps wildly, but our boy is just a bit faster. A special effect activates as dark tendrils crawl up the blade. Lifesteal, a notification confirms his health is being restored, healing some wounds. This wounded wolf can only growl, stunned by its opponent's resilience. Kadam smirks, taunting the beast to try again. He strikes with blinding speed, sending blood from the wolf's head and drives his glowing sword straight through its skull. He stands over his kill, the blade pulsing with stolen life force. Another message appears announcing all of his wounds are now healed, and he realizes even the injury from the Paladin's spear is gone. Standing in a field of corpses, he admits the wolves were a lucky break. He explains his sword's new power, lifesteal, which restores health with every hit. Kadam reflects on his sword's low grade and its limited healing power, but he sighs, deciding this will have to be enough for now. This ability to enchant weapons without materials is a massive advantage, and he reminds himself not to get greedy. A lesson learned the hard way nearby. The merchant nervously peeks out from behind a tree. Asking if it's over, he sees the slaughtered wolves. Amazed, Kadam could win in his weakened state, but as he gets closer, he realizes all of Kadam's wounds have vanished. And Kadam turns, asking the merchant a simple question. Why didn't you run? Leaving the man completely stunned by the unexpected query, Kadam points out he was too weak to give chase if the man had fled, forcing the merchant to pause and actually consider his actions before a sudden shocking realization dawns on his face. Kadam smirks as the merchant claims he'd be dead anyway, but then he wonders why he stayed, realizing he was worried about Kadam. Kadam tells the merchant he's on night watch and walks off to rest, but he stops, giving a chilling warning about what happens if he's caught running. A threat so gruesome the merchant freezes, believing every single word. So the merchant keeps watch by the fire, alone in the dead of night. This next morning, they prepare to set out once again, and the guide explains their 10-day journey to the Alliance's border. Kadam grimly states he wants to avoid any more encounters with Paladins, and the guide reassures him they chose a weakly guarded route to avoid them. He notes that bandits are no match for a warrior of Kadam's level, pointing to a small fortress where they can resupply far from the church's reach. From there, a shortcut leads to the Golden Highway, a direct path to their goal. Kadam reflects on their long journey, knowing it's nothing like the old days when the continent was a fractured battleground of warring kingdoms, a dangerous era where outsiders, especially imposing barbarians, were met with hostility. He remembers how even Melissa, a bookish mage, once looked at him with utter disgust, her journal entries painting him as a monstrous, suspicious figure to be avoided. Kadam smirks at the memory, dismissing it as a pointless distraction from the present. This guide reassures him that the Alliance is far more accepting these days, but his words trail off under Kadam's intimidating, silent gaze, and just then they spot a group of men blocking the road up ahead. Kadam asks for the merchant's assessment of the situation, and the man nervously identifies them as bandits. Though they seem to be arguing, deciding it's best to avoid trouble, Kadam suggests they find another route, but before they can turn back, one of the hooded men spots them with a look of shock, and the leader of the group starts shouting in their direction. Kadam's expression darkens, clearly annoyed by the unwanted attention. He takes a firm step forward, ready to confront them, his hands tightening around the hilts of his weapons. With a burst of speed, he charges directly toward the group of bandits, only to stop short, his expression completely unimpressed. A bandit cries out, but not in fear, his eye glowing with a strange light as he claps his hands together in a theatrical gesture. And suddenly the bandits are fawning over Kadam, presenting him to the other group. This opposing group, seeing this imposing warrior, immediately turns to flee, and the bandits erupt in laughter, taunting the cowards for running away. Kadam's patience wears thin as he asks one last time what exactly is going on. A hooded man thanks Kadam for his help, calling him by a strange title, but Kadam coldly denies the name, telling the group to get lost. These men are stunned by his response, realizing he's not who they thought, and their friendly demeanor instantly vanishes, replaced by suspicion. This leader draws a dagger, demanding to know who he really is, his face twisting in rage as he calls Kadam a nobody who caused trouble. Kadam remains silent, unimpressed by the sudden hostility. This bandit leader gets in his face, demanding he take responsibility. Kadam notes how quickly they turned on him once they felt they had the numbers. Their attention then shifts to the guide, eyeing his massive backpack, and one of them reaches out, demanding to see what's inside. This terrified guide flinches away from the bandit's grasp, while Kadam continues to watch, completely unfazed by their threats. This bandits now demand financial compensation for the confusion he caused. Kadam's expression darkens, his patience clearly wearing thin. This bald leader smirks, offering him an alternative to paying them, suggesting Kadam pretend to be the warrior they were expecting and fight for them. They mockingly demonstrate how he should act like a super strong barbarian, insisting he must take responsibility for the mess he's made. This leader then taunts him further, asking if he's actually a woman. This whole group erupts in laughter, mocking his silence as fear behind him. The guide worries that Kadam is holding back to avoid a fight. This bandit leader pats his chest, declaring their deal is sealed, but he's met with a cold, murderous glare from Kadam, oblivious to the danger. The man asks for his new partner's name. Kadam calmly agrees to tell the bandits his name, and in a flash his blade slices through the air, cutting down the first bandit before he can even react. This man's head hits the dirt with a sickening thud, leaving his companions completely stunned by the sudden violence. This guide can only scream in absolute terror at the bloodshed, while another bandit curses, confirming his friend is dead. This remaining bandit threatens Kadam, vowing he won't escape, but our boy simply introduces himself with a bloodied sword. He declares himself a great warrior of the Atala tribe. This scene cuts to a butterfly resting on an axe handle, which is embedded in the ground in the middle of the forest. A hand suddenly grips the axe, sending the butterfly fluttering away as Kadam brings the weapon down on another bandit's skull. He looks over the carnage with a grim expression, noting that the axe he's using is in terrible shape. He decides he'll need to find a proper weapon at the fortress, turning his attention to the last surviving bandit, who trembles in fear. This man looks around in horror, realizing all his comrades are gone. Kadam gives him a cold, dismissive glance and the bandit immediately turns to flee for his life, but he trips over his own feet in his haste, crashing face first into the unforgiving ground. Kadam calmly tells him he won't have to use the axe again, looming over him with a threat to shatter his spine for answers. Kadam interrogates the captured bandit, demanding to know about Agon's furious horns. This terrified man can only cower on the ground, too scared to answer. This guide quickly explains that Agon is a city within the Free City Alliance and home to a legendary barbarian mercenary known as Agon's Furious Horns. Kadam wonders if these bandits somehow mistook him for that famous warrior, but the guide finds that strange since a celebrity like that wouldn't be out here. This bandit shouts back that his boss and Horns are actually close friends, and he threatens that the legendary warrior is coming for them all. Kadam grabs the man by his robes, who screams in sudden pain. This bandit explains his gang was pushed out and his boss called for help. This guide looks down at the man, telling him he's been completely fooled. He points out a real friend wouldn't let his buddy run a backwater bandit gang. This bandit's eyes widen in confusion as the logic starts to sink in, and he begins to panic, realizing his boss might have been lying all along. Kadam decides it's better to strike first than be hunted down by the gang. Plus, it's a chance to loot supplies and maybe find some decent weapons. His expression hardens with grim resolve, a new plan already forming. This bandit begs him not to go, pleading that he can't lead them there, but Kadam begins dragging him forward without a single word. He pulls the screaming man down the path, forcing him to be their guide. They soon arrive at the entrance to the Bloody Cave gang's base inside. A man sits on a makeshift throne, waiting patiently for something. He's a scarred, middle-aged man with a stern, calculating look on his face. He introduces himself as Graham, leader of the gang and brother to Agon's Furious Horns, boasting that he too was once a proud and valiant gladiator in the arena. A bandit leader panics, revealing he's a washed-up gladiator with a losing record. He admits he lied about sending for help because his subordinates pressured him. Wondering where it all went wrong when he just wanted a simple life, all he ever desired was to live modestly with his loyal crew through banditry, but he blames the rival Blackhammer gang for encroaching on his territory. Suddenly, a subordinate rushes in shouting that Agon's Furious Horns has arrived. This messenger confirms the legendary warrior is here, leaving the boss stunned, but the man's message quickly turns into a desperate scream for help. This bandit leader can only growl in utter confusion at the sudden chaos. As Kadam emerges from the shadows over the fallen messenger's body, this bandit leader stares in absolute shock at the blood-soaked warrior, recognizing the distinctive dress and massive build of a barbarian, and wonders if this could truly be the legendary Agon's Furious Horns. Kadam points his blade forward, asking the man if he's the boss, leaving the leader completely speechless. Unable to process the situation, our boy repeats his question, his gaze locked on the man on the throne. A dark, intimidating aura begins to swirl around Kadam's powerful frame. This leader realizes this isn't the real Horns. Wondering who this stranger is and seeing his fallen subordinate, he knows everyone outside is already dead, even if he's not the legend. This intruder is clearly dangerous, and the bandit leader clenches his fist, deciding to take action. He prepares to launch a preemptive strike against the mysterious warrior. Kadam smirks, intrigued by the man's plan to fight with bare hands with glowing eyes. The bandit leader lunges forward in a furious charge, but Kadam just watches him come, completely unfazed by the attack. With a final, brutal swing, Kadam cuts down the last of the bandits, leaving their leader groveling on the ground. Begging for his life, this man offers up a chest of valuables, but Kadam coldly tells him not to call him boss, and the guide watches, recognizing the bandit's desperate posture all too well. This bandit's eyes widen in terror as Kadam raises his blood-soaked sword, and he frantically offers to pay tribute to be spared. He realizes his pleas are useless, lamenting his pathetic end after surviving so much, but then a sudden idea seems to strike him, a last-ditch effort to save his own. He shouts out a new offer, a treasure map, explaining it leads to legendary dwarven-made throwing axes. Kadam pauses, his expression shifting with sudden interest. This bandit confirms the axes were crafted by master dwarven artisans. And Kadam simply tells him to keep talking. This bandit smiles, relieved he's finally caught the warrior's attention, boasting that the axes never dull and can even seek out their targets. Kadam knows dwarven equipment is on another level, far superior to human gear, and he recalls just how difficult it was to acquire in the game. While races like dwarves and elves existed, they were minor factions. And in this new reality, the dwarves' dislike of humans made their gear nearly impossible to obtain. He realizes this is a golden opportunity to get a high-performance weapon, and he demands to know where the map is, his patience wearing thin, but the bandit tries to bargain, demanding a guarantee of his safety first, and Kadam just smirks, amused by the man's audacity to negotiate. Before his blade flashes through the air with deadly intent, this bandit leader stares in disbelief, the sword already buried in his chest. As the man screams in agony, Kadam reveals his own negotiation skills. Promising to keep punching holes in him until he finally starts talking, this terrified leader can only tremble, clutching the blade in his chest. This scene then cuts to the rival Blackhammer gang's base inside their fortress. A guard desperately insists that what he saw was real, but his superior accuses him of spouting nonsense as usual, until a massive hammer slams down, silencing their bickering instantly. A scarred man on a throne demands to know what they're talking about, this boss Kreven questions if Agon's furious horns is truly helping their rivals. His subordinates nervously confirm the unbelievable report, but Krevan scoffs, asking if that story even makes sense. They plead with him, insisting they saw a bear-sized barbarian with their own eyes. Kreven considers their words, recalling the rumors of Graham's friendship with the legend, but dismisses it as a bluff, since a champion wouldn't help a third-rate gang. Still, a sliver of doubt remains. What if it really is Furious Horns? Suddenly, a messenger bursts in, shouting that they're under attack. Kreven demands to know their numbers, and the man reveals there are only two. One is their leader and the other is a massive barbarian, the legendary Horns. His subordinates can't believe it, questioning how just two men could attack them. Kreven's expression hardens, realizing that if the rumors are true, they stand no chance against the legend in a direct confrontation. He grips his hammer, ordering his men to set up an ambush with fire arrows, his massive war hammer gleaming with deadly intent, and he rises from his throne, ready to confirm the truth for himself. This Black Hammer leader watches them approach, wondering if it's really Agon's furious horns. As they walk, Graham tells Kadam they're almost at the enemy base. He nervously asks if Kadam is truly planning to just walk into the Blackhammer gang's territory. Kadam glares back, asking if Graham lied about the map's location. This former leader frantically explains they lost that territory to their rivals. He insists it's suicide to openly challenge such a large and dangerous gang, and when asked for numbers, he wildly exaggerates, hoping to scare Kadam off, but our boy is unimpressed. Simply noting it's a lot for a minor gang, he declares he'll be tired after killing them all and wants to finish quickly. Graham can only stare in disbelief at Kadam's insane confidence. They finally arrive, coming face to face with the gang's imposing leader. These two warriors lock eyes in a silent, tense standoff. This Blackhammer boss, Kreven, demands to know why Graham is here. Graham puffs out his chest, boldly declaring the end of the Blackhammer gang. He introduces Kadam as the legendary arena champion, Agon's furious horns, sending a wave of shock and fear through the enemy bandits. Graham smirks, planning his escape while the two sides are distracted. But Kadam suddenly grabs him by the hair, demanding to know what he's doing. He lifts the man, shouting that he is not the legendary warrior they think he is. Kadam insists there's no need for a fight if he gets what he came for. This Black Hammer leader's expression shifts to a smug grin, realizing the deception. Kadam repeats that he's not Agon's horns and only wants to retrieve an item. He offers them a chance to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. This leader deduces Kadam is just a mercenary who turned on his foolish employer. He wonders why this nobody is acting so tough, clearly not grasping his situation. A massive hammer slams down, marking the territory of the Blackhammer gang. Archers stand ready on the fortress walls, their crossbows aimed and loaded, while their leaders watch the approaching strangers with calculating eyes. Kadam and his captive find themselves completely surrounded by these new bandits and their leader. A hulking man in armor offers to cooperate with the mercenary, but Kadam simply says he's looking for a map, and his guide knows the way. This bandit leader's eyes widen in surprise at the mention of a map, and he suddenly pulls out a very familiar-looking parchment. This captured bandit screams in shock, wondering how this man has the treasure map. This new leader explains his men found it and many have come seeking its treasure. He smirks, realizing this map is exactly what Kadam came for. Kadam's eyes narrow as the situation takes an unexpected turn. With a wicked laugh, the bandit leader begins tearing the map to shreds, leaving the captive horrified at the sight of his last hope being destroyed. This leader then shoves the torn pieces of the map into his mouth, swallowing the entire thing in a final insane act of defiance. He pats his stomach, daring the barbarian to try and take it now, a smug, challenging grin plastered across his face. Kadam accepts the challenge without a hint of hesitation, vowing to retrieve it before it reaches the man's stomach. This leader's bravado shatters, and he orders his men to fire immediately, a bandit's finger tightening on the trigger of his crossbow. As the archers all take aim at the lone warrior, Kadam's gaze remains locked on his target, completely unfazed, and he grabs his captive by the head, who can only stammer in terror. Kadam grabs a hostage, using the terrified man as a human shield, just as a volley of crossbow bolts fills the air, riddling the poor man's body while Kadam remains untouched. This enemy leader stares in disbelief at the brutal tactic, while the man screams in agony, held firmly in Kadam's grip. This leader realizes the warrior is ruthlessly sacrificing his own man, and he orders his archers to aim for anything exposed. A crossbowman scrambles to reload his weapon, but a blood-soaked axe suddenly comes flying towards him, and he can only look up in sheer terror. This weapon slams into another archer's head with brutal force, embedding itself deep into his skull. Kadam's hand is shown, having just thrown the deadly projectile as the remaining archers shout in panic about the thrown axe. His human shield begs for it all to stop, still taking hits, and another bolt pierces straight through his hand. This man screams for Kadam to just kill him instead of prolonging the torture. While the leader furiously yells at his men for their poor aim, he changes tactics. Ordering the rest of his forces to charge forward, a horde of bandits rushes toward Kadam and his living shield, and our boy shoves the screaming man directly into their path. This hostage crashes into the front line, creating an opening in the chaos. Kadam knows his Mosquito potion can heal minor wounds, but this is too much, so he decides to end this fight quickly and decisively. This bandit leader watches in confusion, wondering what Kadam just drank. Kadam feels a surge of exhilaration, far stronger than he's ever felt before. His hand tightening around the hilt of his blood-soaked sword, and he takes a single deliberate step into the fray, his eyes glowing with a menacing crimson light. Suddenly, a rival gang storms the area, shouting for the Bloody Cave Gang's boss, but they stop short, confused when they realize the barbarian has vanished. In the next instant, a flash of steel cuts through their ranks, leaving the bandits screaming in panic as their comrades fall headless. This demon blood buff effect kicks in, anchoring him with a powerful stomp, and Kadam becomes a red blur of absolute carnage. With his agility boosted, the bandits can't even track his movements, as his blade slices through the air again and again, finding its mark on another unsuspecting throat, then another bandit's face in a brutal slash, and a third man falls before he can even react, watching from the back. A large armored man sees his men panicking, wondering how a simple barbarian could wield such monstrous, divine-like power. He stares at the monster carving through his forces with cold, brutal precision, his expression hardening as a new plan begins to form. He shouts for his CROSSBOWmen to bring their weapons to him immediately. A loaded crossbow is quickly placed into his waiting hands, and he knows that no matter how fast Kadam is, he must stop to attack, creating a brief window of opportunity right after every kill. He watches as Kadam turns to find his next target, and with a shout, he prepares to take his shot from the back. A bandit takes aim with a heavy crossbow, and the bolt strikes Kadam square in the back amidst the carnage. But our boy just turns with a chilling, unfazed smirk. This crossbowman celebrates his successful shot with a wicked grin. This arrow soars through the air with deadly speed. Yet Kadam's crimson eyes watch it approach without a hint of fear, leaving the bandit to believe he's already won the fight. But in a flash, Kadam's gaze sharpens with lethal intent, and the bandit's confidence instantly shatters into confusion. A hand suddenly snatches the projectile right out of the air. As Kadam holds the arrow, completely unharmed by the attack, this bandit stares in disbelief, unable to process what he just saw. Kadam takes a heavy, deliberate step forward, his imposing frame radiating an aura of pure intimidation. This leader screams for his men to grab more crossbows, and the remaining bandits rush forward to protect their boss. But a golden blur flashes through their ranks, a whirlwind of steel and fury cutting them all down in a single, brutal motion. Kadam's expression remains cold and utterly relentless. This leader realizes the crossbows only made Kadam change targets. Learning from his subordinate they only have 3 shots left. With sweat beading on his face, he makes a desperate decision, reaching for a different weapon at his side, a massive, crude stone hammer resting on the ground. This bandit leader hefts the giant stone hammer, swinging it with furious intent, but Kadam plants his foot firmly, his crimson aura flaring with power, and he vanishes in a blur of motion, easily dodging the clumsy attack. This leader knows his hammer is useless against such blinding speed, and a flicker of panic crosses his face as he searches for another option. His eyes land on a fallen crossbow, a new, desperate plan forming, but Kadam is already upon him, his blade poised to strike the final blow. So the leader roars in defiance, swinging the hammer in a wild, desperate arc. This massive weapon smashes into the ground, missing Kadam completely, who simply grunts at the impact, his gaze locked on his target. This leader screams for his men, revealing this was all just a distraction. His remaining archers fire their last bolts in a coordinated volley, and Kadam realizes the leader is resorting to cheap tricks now. This leader uses the opportunity to quickly snatch the loaded crossbow. His hand closing around the wooden stock with grim determination, Kadam deflects the incoming bolts. As the leader taunts him from afar, one bolt lodges in his arm guard, but his focus is on the new threat, this bandit leader aiming his own crossbow at point-blank range. He grins maniacally, certain that Kadam can't dodge a shot this close, but our boy simply ducks, moving faster than the eye can follow, his crimson aura exploding as he closes the final distance in an instant. This leader's confidence shatters, his eyes wide with utter shock because Kadam is already behind him, his arm wrapped around the man's throat. This bandit leader chokes, unable to even process what just happened as Kadam lifts him effortlessly, ready to extract the map by any means necessary. This bandit leader trembles in disbelief, unable to comprehend what just happened as Kadam catches the speeding crossbow bolt between his teeth, spitting out the shattered remains onto the ground. This leader realizes with horror that our boy caught the arrow from that distance, and Kadim tells him to wait while he deals with the rest of his men. This bandit can only listen to the screams of his forces being annihilated, until Kadam's bloodied sword slams down right in front of him. With the massacre complete, Kadam stands over the terrified leader, who now desperately begs for his life to be spared. Kadam smirks, saying he won't kill him, just cut him open for the map. This leader panics, shouting that he's memorized everything on the parchment, revealing the treasure is in a chest beneath Molden Fortress. But Kadam questions why they never retrieved it themselves. and the leader explains the fortress is surrounded by hundreds of soldiers. Kadam ignores his excuses, demanding to know who is besieging the fortress. This man reveals it's Viscount Adlin's troops sent to execute a demon baron, leaving Kadam to realize this mission is far more complicated than he thought. He raises his sword anyway, deciding to verify the story himself, stating plainly that he doesn't trust a single word from a bandit. He simply reminds the man of his earlier challenge to take the map if he could. Later that night, Kadam sits by a roaring campfire. He tosses the bloody, torn pieces of the map to a merchant, who recoils in disgust, asking where he could have possibly found it. Kadam calmly explains he retrieved it from the bandit leader's stomach, after piecing it together. The merchant confirms the map matches the bandit's story. Kadam reflects on the bandit's words, realizing the story of Molden Fortress was true, and now he has a new name to hunt down the Demon Baron. This scene shifts to a quiet village shrouded in the darkness of night, where a terrified local insists no one has passed through recently. This villagers plead their case, swearing that nothing out of the ordinary has occurred. Suddenly, a heavily armored female paladin arrives to question them, demanding they swear their honesty before her god Elga. Her intense gaze sweeps across the crowd of frightened villagers, as she presses them to swear an oath to the solemn Lord of Light. This man stammers. Unable to give a straight answer under the pressure, this paladin's focus shifts to a woman who remembers Kadam's chilling warning, a command to never speak of the demon that had appeared in their village. This memory of his cold, threatening glare is still fresh in her mind, along with his promise to return and slaughter them all if they talked. But the paladin isn't convinced, knowing the signs point to her target passing through. This villager swears no mercenary has come through, making a fatal mistake. Because the paladin's eyes narrow as she never mentioned a mercenary, this woman gasps, realizing her husband just exposed their lie. This paladin's hand moves to the hilt of her sword, her patience gone, and pure, unadulterated terror fills the villager's eyes. As she draws her weapon, the woman begins to scream in panic, but a piercing shriek from a nearby building cuts through the night. This villagers desperately try to cover it up, begging her to pay it no mind, yet the paladin's cold expression shows she knows exactly what's happening. Her eyes widen in shock as the truth of the situation dawns on her. A young man convulses on the ground, choking and gasping for air. A female paladin declares he's possessed, but his mother insists it's an illness. This paladin ignores her pleas, stepping forward with cold determination. This desperate mother grabs her leg, begging the holy knight for mercy. She begins a prayer to the Lord of Light, her hand glowing with divine energy, commending the boy's soul to her god as she prepares to act, and her gauntlet descends upon the boy's head in a blinding flash. He's lifted into the air by a pillar of pure golden light, as the onlookers feel a warm, gentle presence wash over them. This young man, Maroni, falls back to the ground, now calm and still. His mother rushes to his side as the paladin announces he's been saved. She promises his soul will never again be tempted by demonic whispers, and the relieved mother offers her heartfelt, tearful thanks, but a sudden sound makes her turn back in confusion and alarm. This paladin now stands with her sword engulfed in holy flames, declaring that anyone tainted by evil cannot be allowed to live. This mother looks down in horror to see her son's head. Now severed and burning, a gut-wrenching scream of pure agony rips from her throat. This paladin coldly explains she ended the boy's life for his eternal rest, then places her blade against the mother's neck, calling her a non-believer. She demands the woman confess the truth or face eternal damnation, finally revealing her true goal: finding the barbarian fiend Kadam. This scene shifts to a quiet forest at night where Kadam rests by a fire. His guide remarks on their loot after wiping out 2 whole bandit gangs, but notes they still haven't found the high-quality weapons Kadam seeks. Kadam turns to his new guide, asking about the Lord of Molden, and the man recalls hearing the name Demon Baron in passing, but he doubts the Lord is evil since Molden is said to be a prosperous town. Kadam counters that demons often bring false hope before snatching it away. He decides he must confirm the truth himself to get the dwarven weapons. But he wonders if he can break through an army with so little demon blood left. This guide nervously interrupts, asking if he can pose a question, and Kadam simply listens, waiting for him to continue. This man asks about the title Attala's Great Warrior that Kadam used earlier, stammering that he's heard another legendary mercenary uses that same name. Kadam's eyes widen in shock at the mention of an imposter, and the guide flinches back, terrified by his sudden reaction. He drops to the ground. Apologizing profusely for his grave sin and asking, Kadam explains that Attala's Great Warrior is no mere nickname. Only one can hold it. It is a sacred title granted to the one chosen to slay the archdemon. This leaves only 2 possibilities for the man known as Agon's Furious Horns. Either he's a fraud or Attala has abandoned Kadam for another warrior. He tells the man to get up, ordering him to rest before they leave at dawn. Kadam takes a firm step forward, his mind now set on a new path, contemplating whether this man is a liar or if he's been forsaken by his god. But either way, he vows to tear this impostor apart when they meet.